I'm Katherine Johnson from Learn Behavioral, back with another video for parents. Today we're talking about generalization. This is such a huge topic and there are so many aspects to it. It's not really something that can be thoroughly explored in under 10 minutes, but we're just going to talk about one piece of generalization today called stimulus generalization. This is the ability of a person to learn a skill under one set of conditions and then be able to perform that skill under a different set of conditions and optimally perform the skill in the conditions in the natural environment. So for instance, if I take a sewing class and learn to sew on their sewing machine, generalization would be if I'm able to go to my sister's house and use the skills that I've learned on her sewing machine in a different environment. I remember when I first got into the field and the written programs that I was given would all have sort of the same format. There'd be a number of steps, and then the last step would always be to test for generalization or to generalize the skill. So what does that mean? Basically, you want to test out this new skill or knowledge under different conditions and vary as many elements as you can. So you want to make sure that the skill generalizes across people, across environments, and across stimuli or materials. For example, let's say that I'm teaching a child a joint attention response. So when I say, look at that, and I point to something, I want the child to follow my point, look at what I'm pointing at, and then look back at me and check for my reaction. So we're sort of sharing that moment. So say we're working on this at home and we decide to teach this by putting his favorite books and toys all around the house on various levels on various surfaces. So when it's time to teach joint attention, we walk around the house, and when I say look and point at something, one of his toys and books, he looks at it, he looks at me, I say hooray, look what we found, and we play with the toy, we play with the book, or read the book. So in order for that skill to be generalized, we would want to be sure that he can do this with anyone, not just me. That's generalizing across people. We would want to be sure that he can do this anywhere, not just at home, but out in the world. That's generalizing across environments. And we would want to be sure that he could do this in a response to a variety of phrases and no matter what it is I'm pointing at. That's generalization across stimuli. So today, as I said, we don't have time to go into everything, but we're going to talk about the 4 most common ways that you can teach, things you can do from the very beginning that will help your child generalize more readily. So one of the first things is to have multiple instructors in the first place during the teaching phase. This is why a lot of ABA organizations pre-COVID would have children have several different ABA therapists. Now, because of COVID, a lot of organizations are cohorting their kids, and kids have fewer instructors or maybe even just one ABA therapist. So in this case, it becomes even more important than it ever was before to have parents also be participating in therapy whenever possible. Because you can definitely end up in the situation where one person teaches a child a skill, and then that's the only person for whom the child will perform that skill. So having multiple people participating in instruction from the very beginning is helpful. The setting that you're teaching in is really important. One excellent way to promote generalization is to simply teach the skill in the environment it's going to be used in. If you're teaching ordering in a restaurant, it's going to be easier to generalize if you teach it in a restaurant than if you teach it at home and then hope the skill crosses over. A lot of times that's not feasible though. So bringing elements from the natural environment into the teaching environment is another way to go. For instance, if you're teaching preschool circle time skills at home, you might set things up in the same way that they do at school, with the calendar and the flag and the rug sort of like all in the same places. Another helpful thing to do to program for generalization is just to teach in multiple environments. So for instance, if you're teaching your child to respond to their name with eye contact, it will help long-term generalization if you work on it in different rooms, inside, outside, on walks, in the backyard, in the woods, like all different environments right from the very start. Multiple exemplar training, or general case, refers to varying all of the stimuli that you're using to teach. This includes materials and vocal antecedents. So as far as materials, I'll give you an example. If you're teaching the vocabulary word dog, for instance, you would want to use as many different examples of a dog as possible. So you want to vary the size of the dog, the color, the breed, the position they're in the picture, cute dogs, ugly dogs, just kidding, no ugly dogs, short-haired dogs, furry dogs, everything. And then your child learns the essential features of a dog and doesn't focus on the extraneous features of a dog that don't matter, like color. You'll also want to vary the question that you ask or that the instruction that you give, the vocal antecedent. So if you're teaching your child imitation skills, for instance, and you use only one vocal antecedent, like do this, you may end up having a kiddo who will imitate only when you're saying the exact thing you said when you were teaching. So if possible, start from the very beginning using all different ways of saying the same thing. When you're teaching imitation, you might say, do this. Sometimes you might say, hey, copy me. Sometimes you might not say anything at all. You might just do the action. I want to note that some children are able to learn with multiple materials and vocal antecedents from the very beginning. Some children are more successful learning with just one or two variances. And in those cases, you need to build up to the multiple examples, but that's the ultimate goal, to get there eventually. The last thing we're going to talk about is fading reinforcement. This is something that's critical to generalization because the thick schedules of reinforcement that we use in ABA teaching environments are often very different from the natural reinforcement that happens in the real world. The goal is to fade from reinforcers like edibles and toys to eventually tokens or points, and then eventually to praise, and then to whatever the reinforcer and the reinforcement schedule is in the natural environment. So that's it for today. I hope you found this video helpful and that you will always remember to think about programming for generalization from the very beginning of each skill that you teach. Happy generalizing!